UA helps shape their students into those who will go beyond, or plus ultra as their motto implies. These are some of the core values that the school upholds. Though there are other schools in the universe of Boku no My Hero Polycythemia that have different sets of ideals and values that glorify different parts of hero work. One of these schools is the UA of the West, Shiketsu, where their students are required to wear their hats at all times while working, as they must respect their school and uphold Shiketsu values. These values being striving to maintain dignity while providing hero service, and no person represents and respects these values better than the second-year gatekeeper with the tiny eyes, Seiji Shishikura. Seiji Shishikura is slowly becoming one of Horikoshi's favorite characters. He fell in love with him personality-wise and quirk-wise while writing him, to the point that I wouldn't be surprised if he found a way to squeeze him into another future arc. Though, before we get too into that, we should actually understand the meaning behind his name. Seiji's name is designed like all of Horikoshi's other characters, to help hint at his personality and ability. That way, when you break it down later, you can see where Horikoshi was coming from when he was making the character. So first, let's start with his given name, Seiji. So the name Seiji, when broken down, means refined and zealous child, which fits perfectly for Seiji as a character, given how strongly he feels about his Shiketsu and other hero-specific values, specifically on how refined one must be to be a hero, so much so that he would choose to gatekeep people out of getting a license during the license exam instead of working to get one on his own, as he values his position to choose who can and cannot become a hero over actually just becoming a hero. This part of his personality comes from his zealous meaning of his name, making it so he tries to inject his values into any situation in order to enforce his views on those who he sees as unenlightened or savages. His zealous nature also makes it hard for him to admit when he's influenced by people who don't fully match his ideal views, people like the hero killer Stain.
Me? Influenced by a villain? Absurd.
Then you have Shishikura, which when broken down means meat warehouse or flesh storehouse, which directly plays into how his quirk works, and that quirk being the delightfully disgusting meatball, or as it's directly translated, processed meat. Meatball is a powerful quirk which allows Seiji to manipulate his flesh or the flesh of anyone he touches, though he can only freely manipulate his own flesh to the point he can make it float around. When he uses his quirk on others, it can only compress them down into small meatballs, hence the name of his quirk, Meatball. Now, as I said, when using Meatball on his own body, Seiji gains a lot of variety in his attacks, like the ability to detach the parts of his body and freely control them with his thoughts. He is also able to mold the flesh of those parts that he's detached into whatever he likes, like when he turned his arms into a massive hand behind him. Also, this extended range of movement, given the fact that he controls it with his thoughts, means he increases the range of his touch-based quirk to insane levels, giving Seiji access to a number of offensive and defensive moves that a normal touch-based quirk user wouldn't have access to. First, of course, let's talk about his increased offensive capabilities, which allow him to detach and now throw pieces of his body at you in order to grab and constrain you. Though what makes this extra dangerous is the size of the meatball doesn't matter, since all he needs to do is touch you, and all of your body is his to process at his leisure. And if you try to fight back against the meatballs, you'll just be losing a war of attrition, because his meatballs are also extremely effective defensively. As you see, in the detached state, his flesh is now able to be broken and ripped apart without actually leaving any lasting damage on Seiji, meaning that he can detach his flesh and defend his main body, as shown when he blocks Bakugo's AP scatter shot, and even if you do manage to separate the pieces of the body, they can then just come back together and reform the thing that he was originally going to attack you with. Though, he can still feel pain in this detached state, but as long as the pain isn't too serious, it doesn't hinder his ability at all. But if Seiji is hit with consistent, lasting damage, he slowly loses control over his meatballs, and if he's knocked out, he loses full control over his quirk. Now, influence-wise, I feel Seiji's quirk is inspired by the Dragon Ball Z villain, Majin Buu. First, of course, you have when Buu takes enough damage from an explosive attack, he is ripped apart but easily comes back together, shown multiple times throughout his arc. But also, the sneak attack Seiji uses against Bakugo during the exam is strikingly similar to the one used by Buu to absorb Gohan, Piccolo, and Gotenks. Though the whole skin manipulation thing might also be a callback to a Ghost Rider villain called the Skinbender, a Japanese demon who uses the form of Sailor Venus from Sailor Moon. They had the ability to manipulate and bend flesh to their will, using it to push their ideals onto those around them. And their ability worked on everyone but Ghost Rider, whose skin burnt to the touch and gave the Skinbender a unique sensation, intrigue and mystery, which in turn made the Skinbender fall in love with Ghost Rider, which caused her to embrace him and burn alive. Though she didn't die and was tossed into the ocean, waiting to stumble upon some unlucky fishermen with some very unlucky skin. Though Seiji may not be like the skinbender in appearance, and thank God for that, the way Seiji uses his quirk to enforce his ideals on those around him makes it feel like the influence is somewhere there within his character. I mean, with him joining the license exam purely to gatekeep those who he doesn't believe deserve the licenses, makes it appear like his influences weren't exactly from the most heroic places. Though this passion to choose who gets to enter hero society, in turn cutting the fat of what drags down that society, is what makes Seiji such an interesting character, as his determination comes from both his Shiketsu ideals, but also he's heavily influenced by outside sources such as the hero killer Stain's ideology, which is kind of funny for a man who is so zealous in his nature to be so easily influenced by outside sources, yet refuse to admit it. And it's these influences that likely shaped his hero design. First, he seems to have taken heavy inspiration from pro-heroes who more seriously reflect the Shiketsu values, ones who act with honor and dignity in their work. Pro-heroes like Best Jeanist, who you can obviously see the influences on in both his hero costume and likely his overall design, as Seiji parts his hair in a very similar way to how Jeanist does. You also have Seiji wearing his oversized collar, much like Best Jeanist. Then of course you have the military aesthetic found in Inasa and all other Shiketsu student designs, with the polished black leather costume made alongside his armband and hat. But most importantly, the major theme of his outfit is that of a butcher, as his hero costume is adorned with a meat cutter's apron, a pair of gloves, and rubber boots, along with his sleeves rolled up like most butchers are required to do so before they cut meat, which of course this entire butcher demeanor is in reference to his quirk, Meatball. With all these outside influences on Seiji's design, you start to notice that his character is that of a wannabe, both in his ideals and his actions, as he outright refuses to accept that someone that he doesn't like has influenced him in some way, showing that he has a tendency to claim others' ideas as his own, be it Shiketsu's, Stain's, or even Inasa's in some cases. Seiji isn't original. And then you have his actions which spit in the face of those ideals. Not only does he choose to gatekeep the exam instead of finishing it himself and going out and cleaning the streets on his own.
You're ignoring the test because you think you're superior? What are you, a crazy person? I'm simply separating the mediocre and extraordinary.
But he always chooses to butt into conversations looking to critique those who have succeeded where he has failed. He is in a sense an armchair hero. Like when he chose to give running commentary alongside Present Mike, a pro-hero Seiji probably doesn't like given his loud mouth, using the excuse that Present Mike lacks the Shiketsu perspective to give accurate commentary for the exam, when he himself lacks the UA perspective. He is all talk and no action, while pretending to be the moral superior to those around him.
Obligation? Dignity? You just like to hear yourself talk. I don't see any proof. Show us with your actions, not your cheap words. If you can. Beast. You're worst of all, Bakugo!
Though it is in how confidently he ignores his own flaws that makes him such a lovable character, and in a lot of cases a very interesting character. And I hope Horikoshi finds more and more ways to include him into the story, maybe a friendly or unfriendly rival to Bakugo, a character who is lacking a rival, and maybe one day the two of them can squash the beef between them. Or maybe Horikoshi will follow up his claims to want to make a spin-off series which follows Seiji in his everyday life, as he loves to draw the meatballed characters that he can create with his quirk. Either way, more Seiji would be great to see in the future. And if you enjoyed this video and like to see more videos like it in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/MeganNotTheBadGuy. And if you want to ball up your meat, well, you can head on over to Funimation.com/show/Shimonetta, boring word of the country doesn't exist. Buy yourself a copy of Shimonetta, ball it up, you blow your meat.